comics. No, not this man, nor this fella, nor this lady, but this sort of thing. Yes, the British comic, a comic such as the Beano or the Dandy. They were huge business at one time, as much of a news agency treat for a 5-year-old as a Mars bar or an ice cream or a 2-litre bottle of White Lightning cider. What? What? Are you telling me I can't raise my kids? The Beano and the Dandy weren't like your Spider-Man's or your Batman's. They were like the funnies from the newspaper, which is a word no one outside of the 1930 New York scene has ever used. Crucially, I've always wondered this. Did anyone at all actually ever laugh at Desperate Dan or Dennis the Menace? Really? I mean, they were sort of mildly amusing when you read them, but they weren't actually funny. Maybe that's just me. Regardless, Round the Bend self-styled itself as a comic like the Beano, but in video form, as it was actually a television programme on ITV1. So yes, it was like one of those comics, only it was run by rats and crocodiles. Round the Bend was a satirical children's ITV show written by the creators of Oink. A somewhat more controversial take, Round the Bend featured a grumpy reptilian host in Doc Croc, who ran the show from a sewer along with his 3 assistant rats, posh Jemima Wellington Green, resident comic vaudeville Vince Vermin, and Italian artist Lucetti Brochetti, otherwise known as Lou Brush. They were rendered in latex by the Spitting Image team, which is pretty obvious when you look at the Australian mounted heads in the background. The team acted as links between various cartoon spoofs and musical parodies of well-known performers, almost always with a scatological bent. He-Man and the Masters of the Universe became Wee-Man and the Masters of the Looniverse. Thundercats became Thunderpants, not to be confused with the Rupert Grint movie, of course. And Kylie Minogue and Jason Donovan became Kylie Manure and Jason Dungovan. Yes, that was the level of comedy involved. All absolutely puerile, but obviously hysterical for those aged 11 and down in 1989. Round the Bend, a hat-trick production, would go on to have 3 series for Yorkshire Television before ending in 1991. It also had a computer game, which is good, otherwise I would have lulled you here under false pretences like that man who claimed he had puppies in his van when I was a child. Round the Bend was developed by Wiseman Productions for Impulse and released on TheSpectrum, Atari ST, Amiga and Commodore 64 in 1991. The story is that Doc Croc has made a bit of a faux pas and blown up the printing press, and all the resulting debris has been flung across the gang's sewer home. And, with the deadline approaching, it is a race against time to collect the various mechanical bits and bobs and get the comic ready for distribution. Not only has the press gone up the Swanee, or I guess down the Swanee, seeing as we're in the sewer, and that was an attempt at comedy, which I won't repeat, but also the latest issue of the comic has been blown to high heaven. What a ruddy farce, old boy. Good grief, sort it out, Doc Croc. You can select any of the 4 main characters from the show as they bound about the slimy turd tunnels, collecting all the various parts of the machine whilst avoiding bats, barrels, slime and teddy bears. The teddies were a glowering menace to the team in the TV show. Should you stumble across a comic page, you can enter it, and you have to move through each panel, avoiding whatever character is depicted in the page to reach the final box and therefore then add it to the collection. Look at it there, like a low budget early proto Comic Zone from the Mega Drive, only incredibly frustrating and slow. Yes indeed, Doc Croc and his staff amble around the various environments with all the grace of a morbidly obese slug. Most of the level is just a sewer. Obviously you do get these little comic strip bits, so it's a bit dull to look at. Some of the enemies are right buggers. The bats, for instance, are the Spectrum equivalent of the Medusa heads in Castlevania, with the added annoyance of one-hit deaths if they get you. There's also a real budgety feel and look to the game. It reminds me quite a bit of those $1.99 alternative Hanna-Barbera games such as Rough and Ready and Yogi Bear, only this game was full price at the time of its release. Overall then, Round the Bend is a disappointing adaptation of a loved at the time but now largely forgotten edgy kids show. Round the Bend scored a generous 74% in the January 1992 edition of Your Sinclair, and I'm with these guys 48% in Sinclair User the very same month. Just going back very briefly to British comics before I go away and leave you to an evening probably much improved. Have you ever thought about the artist who drew Gnasher, the dog owned by Dennis the Menace? Did Gnasher's artist ever actually see a dog in real life? I mean, what the fudge knuckle is that bald-faced thing with shaved legs and bear ears? That is no dog I've ever seen. What lunacy. Okay, thanks. Bye.